Hello everyone, this is lecture 8, and in this lecture we'll learn about personal hygiene uh, related with the food plant, that is food manufacturing plant. So what hygiene means, we actually all know. However, in case of industry, sometimes we need to define this in a more constructive way, such as in USA the term hygiene means to the personal cleanliness and related habits of the workers. So hygienes are mainly connected with the workers. Their their cleanliness, their habit and cleanliness. Okay, and why people are most important when you think about the hygiene? Because people can contaminate many food. Okay, so that means if the people contaminate foods, so foodborne outbreaks or foodborne diseases can occur. Okay, so although the workers, they're most important, but it doesn't mean that they are the only thing who are responsible for a proper hygiene, who are responsible for hygiene thing. Because actually basically the company management, they comes first. Okay, so first they should set a good example by making their plant or building their plant which has sufficient or adequate facilities to maintain the good hygienic practices. And also they should, the management, they should uh, provide proper trainings to their workers and also persuade the workers to follow the hygiene guidelines and regulations. Okay, and if so, we already know, why it is necessary that the workers, they follow the hygiene guideline properly, because foodborne illness. Okay, to prevent the foodborne illness, the worker or the workers, they can contaminate the food, and if this food is consumed, and there are actually several reports of foodborne outbreaks which occurs due to the contaminated food, and which contaminated was done by food handlers. So if you Google it, you will find several such papers. Okay, and so now we may think that the disease or sick workers are at the risk. Risk means they may contaminate the food, but in fact, actually, the truth is all the healthy person, we are covered with different microorganisms, like especially we are covered with different bacteria. Some of these are the normal flora of our body, and some are transient, such as if we uh, touch a contaminated surface, so we can get, we can get that contamination. So that means those bacteria or microorganisms can transiently adhere into our skin, and if we then handle foods, so from our skin those bacteria can enter into contaminate the food. So that means both normal flora and transient bacteria of a healthy human, it can contaminate the food. Okay, so whenever we think about the hygiene programs or the procedures by the person, they maintain the hygiene, they should consider both of these things. They should consider the normal flora of humans, also should consider the transient flora. Okay, so in this photo you can easily see that where the microorganisms can be found in a healthy human. Okay, in fact, actually, microbes are everywhere, both in our external body surfaces and also in our internal organs, in our internal body. Okay, so although, like for example, in this photo you can see that these workers, they are wearing the different dresses. Okay, they are wearing adequate dresses which are recommended for food handlers. Okay, in a food plant, like they are wearing hat, they are wearing the coat. Okay, even though, although they are wearing this kind of protective clothes, still there are several bare part of the body, and those bare parts contains lots of bacteria, both normal flora and the transient one, and both of these can contaminate the food. Okay, so like our skin, nails, nose, mouth, hair, including the beards and mustaches, everything contains lots of bacteria. Okay, so hygiene program should also consider these sources from which the food can get contaminated. Okay, so these were the like not the inside part of our body, these are the outside part of the body from where the food can get contaminated. Okay, and if we think our inside body, our gut or stomach, it contains lots of bacteria. Okay, such as the adult gastrointestinal tract contains over 1 kilogram of bacteria. Okay, and through the feces human excretes lots of bacteria in the environment. Okay, and if this bacteria contaminate the water or food or like our hand, okay, this can ultimately contaminate the food and cause foodborne diseases. Okay, okay, so this was about the healthy healthy persons, but in case of ill persons, okay, so ill or sick persons, they contain lots of uh, usually the ill or sick persons, they contain more pathogenic microorganism than a healthy person. But okay, so it's actually always prohibited that the sick person or ill person, they cannot work in the food plant. Okay, when they're ill or sick, because at that time they shade contain a lots of bacteria, pathogenic bacteria which can contaminate the food. However, it doesn't mean that the healthy person they don't contain pathogenic bacteria, because there is always a time before the person get sick or ill. Here sick or ill means they show the symptoms. Okay, so there is a window of time before they get sick and after they recover, and both this time, okay, so before they get sick and after they recover, that person, it still sheds lots of bacteria on both this period of time. Okay, so and sometimes even the sick person, they can become carrier to certain pathogens after they recover. Okay, so both of these stages also, where the human can shed the bacteria, also need to be taken into the consideration. Okay, while we think about the hygiene practice. Okay, so this was about ill person. Wound. Okay, so sometimes we get infection in our skin, in the outer part of our body, that is the wound. Wound, they shed lots of pathogenic organisms. Okay, so and especially wounds, they shed high amounts of pathogenic bacteria. Okay, and also other pathogenic microorganisms. So a person with open wound should never be allowed to work in the food processing. Okay, now it's not necessary that a certain lots of people or lots of workers of a food processing plant need to be sick to contaminate the food. Why? Because there are many pathogenic bacteria which don't required in which the infections rate or the infectious dose of those bacteria are really low. Okay, so we know the minimum infectious dose thing, right? Because to cause infection, the a certain minimum amount of microorganism should get into the person. Okay, for some pathogens, this minimum infectious amount is high, but for some pathogens, this minimum amount required to infect a healthy person is really low. For example, Campylobacter jejuni or hepatitis A. Okay, so for these microbes, the minimum infectious amount is quite low. Okay, so even just a single person, their infected with these organisms, or if they are carrier of these organisms, a single person, they can contaminate the like all the foods, okay, during during the work in the food processing. Okay. Okay, so now how the contaminations occur, or you can say like I mean the way by which, or the routes by which food can get contaminated. It can be occur by a direct way or indirect way, or you can say direct routes or indirect routes. So what is direct routes? So we, if we prepare food by our using our bare hand, okay, by our own hand, so if our hand has contamination, it can contaminate the food. This will be a direct route of contaminations. Okay, but sometimes but direct route is not the only route. Food can get contaminated via indirect route also. So for example, I mean our hand is clean, but the utensils we use, such as the knife or the chopping board, are contaminated, so they can contaminate the food item. Okay, or say even like your hand is, if our hand is clean and also the knife and chopping board is clean, but say we are using this knife to chop a chicken, a raw chicken, and if that raw chicken, and that raw chicken have contamination of campylobacter. Okay, so now although the knife is clean, if we use this knife to chop the chicken and then use the same knife to chop the like vegetables, okay, so then the contamination from the chicken can ultimately contaminate the vegetables. Okay, so this will be a indirect route. So it's actually important to understand both all the direct and indirect route by which the food can get contaminated, because when you will prepare a program or plan to maintain hygiene, you have to consider all these route. Okay, so all these route need to be addressed to prevent the food contamination. Okay, now how these microorganisms, especially the foodborne microorganisms, they transmit. Okay, so the fecal oral route is the primary route, or the route by which contamination occurs most frequently. The fecal oral route. Okay, so how this route works? It's actually, it can be a complex route. Okay, because many stakeholders are interconnected here. So let's see how the final food, or we human can get contaminated through the feces. So for example, the feces, okay, the feces can contaminate water, or they can contaminate our hand, especially the fingers. Okay, or also the, I mean the microbes from feces can go into the insects, rodent, bird, etc. Okay, so say our finger gets contaminated by feces. Okay, so then we can, if the fingers or the hands are not properly washed, so they can, then the contamination, the fecal contamination can go into everyday objects, okay, that we use every day, or the food item, or directly to our mouth. Okay, like for example, or like if the water get contaminated by feces, okay, so this water can contaminate the edible foods or the utensils, and finally through consumption we human can get contaminated by the feces, fecal pathogenic organisms. Okay, so now we learn about the sources by which the food can get contaminated. Now, so who are responsible to prevent this contamination? That means which persons are responsible or involved in keeping the hygiene in a food processing plant? Actually, all the persons. Okay, so all the persons, they are responsible. All the persons of a food plant are responsible to keep the hygiene, right? So not only, so it's true that sometimes a special actually, I mean a special concern need to be taken for those personnel who are directly involved in food handling. Okay, so the person who directly involved in food processing, like the raw material or the processing or the finished product, they should have a special concern. Okay, but however, it doesn't mean that the other person, they are not responsible. Everyone is responsible. For example, the cleaner. Okay, the cleaner who clean the floor, or the cleaner who clean the toilet, who clean the washroom. Okay, they also have to be responsible to do those things properly, because if the washroom is not cleaned properly, ultimately it can contaminate the food, right? Because the working personnel in the plant, inside the food handling plant, they will go to the washroom, right? So if the washroom is not clean, they will take the contamination from the washroom into the food. Okay, and not only the working personnel, the management also should be concerned, because the management should provide all the facilities which are required to maintain the hygiene. Okay, so the food plants, they should have a proper plan or program, which we can call the hygiene program, to maintain the hygiene. Okay, and usually these hygiene programs lies with the sanitary department or the hygiene department. Okay, sometimes actually most of the time they can be similar, the for sanitary and hygiene department, or also these programs can lies with the medical department. Okay, medical department of the food plant. And these programs should uh, consist of several things, like for example, pre-employment physical examination. So before recruitment, every personnel should be physically examined, whether they have any current illness or their carrier of certain pathogens. Okay, it should be properly examined. So after that, once the recruitment is done, the employers or workers should go through adequate and proper education and training. Okay, which will train them with basic rules and regulations, or the specific rules and regulations related with that particular food plant. Okay, and so training should be follow up. Okay, follow up and retraining. Follow up and retraining means, okay, you hired a working personnel and train them. That is not enough, so you have to sometimes retrain them, and you also have to take follow up whether they still remember the training things. Okay, they still remember the modules that they were trained, or they are properly. Okay, and also they should the you should supervise. Okay, whether the all the personnels who are responsible for the hygiene program, they are properly doing their work or not. Okay, okay, so that's all for this part. In the next part, we'll learn what to do to maintain personal hygiene and thus food safety. Okay, so thank you for your patience.